Oregon is often pictured as a peaceful place. Towering forests, winding rivers, quiet communities where neighbors look out for one another. But behind this beauty lies a darker truth. Stories where safety shatters and entire families are wiped out in a single night. Tonight we'll look at two of Oregon's most chilling mysteries. The 1911 Ardenwald axe murders, where an entire family was slaughtered in their beds, and the 1974 Cowden family murders, where a young couple and their two children vanished during a camping trip, only to be found months later in the wilderness. Both cases remain unsolved. Both left scars on their communities that have never healed, and both still haunt Oregon to this day. Richard Cowden, 28, was a hard-working father, known as dependable and kind. His wife, Belinda, just 22, was warm and soft-spoken and extremely devoted to her children. Their son, David, was full of energy, and little Melissa was still just a baby, adored by everyone who met her. They were an ordinary family, looking forward to a simple holiday out in nature. Richard Cowden, 28, was a hard-working father, known as dependable and kind. His wife, Belinda, just 22, was warm and soft-spoken and extremely devoted to her children. Their son, David, was full of energy, and little Melissa was still just a baby, adored by everyone who met her. They were an ordinary family, looking forward to a simple holiday out in nature. Labor Day weekend, 1974. Richard and Belinda Cowden decided to take their children, 5-year-old David and 5-month-old Melissa, on a short camping trip in the Siskiyou Mountains of Oregon. The family loved the outdoors, and with summer ending, it was the perfect time for a quiet getaway. No one knew that this trip would end in tragedy, and that their story would become one of Oregon's most enduring mysteries. On the 1st of September, the Cowdens stopped at a small general store in the town of Copper. Richard brought milk, chatted casually with the clerk, and returned to their campsite along Carberry Creek. This was the last confirmed sighting of the family alive. When Richard failed to show up for work the next day, concern quickly spread. Police arrived at the campsite, and what they found was haunting. The family's belongings were all left behind. Food still sat on the picnic table. An open carton of milk was unfinished. Belinda's purse, Richard's wallet, and the family car were untouched. It looked as though the family had simply stood up in the middle of their meal and vanished into thin air. For 7 long months, no trace of the Cowdens was found. And then, in April of 1975, 2 gold prospectors stumbled upon a grisly discovery in a remote part of the Siskiyou Mountains. Hidden in a bush, in a small cave, were the bodies of Richard, Belinda, David, and baby Melissa. Richard had been shot and beaten. Belinda and the children had been hidden under piles of rocks inside the cave. The entire family had been murdered. Suspicion quickly fell on a man named Dwayne Lee Little, a convicted murderer who had been paroled earlier that year. Witnesses reported seeing him near Carberry Creek at the time of the Cowdens' disappearance. His history of violence against women made him a very strong suspect. But the evidence was all circumstantial. There was no physical link to the murders, and no charges were ever filed. Little continued to deny involvement. Nearly 50 years later, the Cowden family murders remain unsolved. Theories range from Dwayne Lee Little's involvement to a chance encounter with a drifter to something far more sinister. What is certain is that the Cowdens went into the woods for a peaceful holiday and instead met a violent, senseless end. Their story lingers as one of Oregon's most chilling, unsolved mysteries. Sunday, June 9th, 1911. In the peaceful community of Ardenwald, Oregon, families were waking up to another quiet summer's morning. But, inside the modest home of William Hill, his wife Ruth and her 2 children, Philip and Dorothy, something was terribly wrong. The family, normally active, seemed to have vanished behind drawn curtains and silence. Neighbors grew uneasy, and soon the truth would horrify the entire state. William Hill was 38 years old, a steady man who had recently married Ruth, bringing her 2 children from a previous marriage into their new blended family. Ruth, just 27, was described as warm and gentle, while the children, Philip, 8, and Dorothy, 5, were known as cheerful, playful kids. They lived a modest life, one filled with love, but no one could imagine why anyone would want to harm them. Concerned neighbors eventually entered the Hill home. What they found was beyond comprehension. The entire family had been brutally murdered in their beds. William and Ruth had been bludgeoned repeatedly in the head with an axe, their faces left unrecognizable. The children had suffered the same fate. The violence was staggering. Whoever had committed the crime had done so with unrelenting fury. Even more disturbing, investigators suggested that Ruth and Dorothy had both been sexually assaulted. This detail adds a chilling layer to an already nightmarish scene. Police quickly began looking at suspects. The first was Nathan Harvey, a wealthy landowner who, according to rumors, had been romantically involved with Ruth. Some speculated jealousy drove him to murder, but Harvey's alibi held, and no physical evidence ever tied him to the scene. Attention then turned to William Riggin, a local man with a reputation for being unstable. He gave conflicting stories, denying involvement at first, and then confessing, and then retracting his confession. Police were desperate, but Riggin's inconsistencies weren't enough to secure a conviction. The case quickly went cold, and with each passing week, the sense of unease grew. Families began locking their doors for the first time. Rumors spread about a wandering killer hiding in the Oregon woods. Some even packed up and left the area entirely. The murders have never been solved. To this day, the Ardenwald axe murders remain one of Oregon's darkest unsolved crimes. A brutal, senseless act that erased an entire family in a single night. The murders of the Hill family in 1911 and the Cowdens in 1974 happened more than 60 years apart, but they share haunting similarities. Both were families destroyed in a single night. Both shocked their community, and both remained unsolved. Oregon's forests and small towns hold breathtaking beauty, but also chilling secrets, and in these 2 cases, justice has never come. 2 families, 2 tragedies, and 2 questions that may never be answered. Who did this? And why?